it's finally 2022, and to kick off my reviews this year, I'm going to start off with reviewing 80 Days Around the World. 80 Days Around the World. Now, 80 Days Around the World follows the story of Phineas Fogg, played by David Tennant in this show, as he travels around the world, and if you guessed it, 80 days. And along the way, he is accompanied by his assistant, known as Passepartout, and also a female journalist who goes by the name of Fix in the show. And basically, throughout this show, they go on all these mini adventures as they travel around the world, and if you guessed it already, 80 days. And that's basically my version of the plot for Around the World in 80 days. And I should say here that I don't know the source material. I don't really know the book that this show is based on. All I know is what I've seen in this show. And honestly, I've got to admit, I enjoyed the show. I did. But I think the reason I enjoyed it so much is because of David Tennant. Honestly, I think David Tennant injected life into this dull and inconsequential and honestly quite bland show in the end. You know, David Tennant is absolutely fantastic in the show, and if I didn't like David Tennant, maybe I wouldn't like the show as much as I do, but the fact is though, David Tennant is in the show, and he plays the main character, so he made me like the show a lot more. Because honestly, so much of the show feels inconsequential, and just feels so anticlimactic, and just feels so, I don't know, bland and not exciting. Honestly, like, one of my big problems with the show is, you know, it's called Around the World in 80 Days, and you expect, you know, the show to feel as grand as its title, but it never does. You don't really feel like these characters have gone around the world in 80 days. I mean, in each episode, they go to all these nice set pieces, and it looks like they've gone to different countries whilst they're shooting the show, which is great and everything like that, but at the same time, though, it doesn't feel like they've gone around the world in 80 days. It feels like they've gone to different set pieces over the course of 3 months when they're shooting the show. That's what it feels like. They go to Hong Kong in one episode, and it just looks like one big set piece, and then they go to, you know, the desert in another episode, and, you know, it's shot well, but at the same time, though, it doesn't feel like they're going around the world. It just feels like they're going from set piece to set piece to set piece. Honestly, every single episode feels like this is where we're going to start our story this episode. This is where we're going for this episode. This is set piece we're going for this episode. And none of it is really making you go, wow, I'm really feeling like they're going around the world in 80 days. It's just making you feel like this show's got a budget. And I understand it has, you know, it's a BBC drama in the end. It's got a budget. But the thing is, though, I can watch something like Doctor Who, and even the most recent Doctor Who's, where clearly, yes, they have a budget, but they're trying to do as much as they can with their budget. I can't say the same about Around the World in 80 Days. Honestly, so much of the show, which is meant to take place like America, Hong Kong, and so on and so on and so on. There's one episode in particular towards the beginning of the show, which I think in France at one point. It doesn't look like it was shot in France, America, and Hong Kong. It looks like it was shot in set pieces, in sets in, you know, a studio somewhere in London. And then some of the exterior set pieces, just like they were shot on, you know, the hills somewhere in Lancashire. That's what it feels like. Or Yorkshire. That's what it kind of feels like when you're watching the show. None of it looks like it really takes place in the countries it's set. And that's like one of my big problems with the show, and also the fact that it's quite inconsequential, it's quite anticlimactic. Honestly, there's these storylines, there's these, you know, subplots that go on throughout the show, and they get quite interesting. There's this whole subplot to Passepartout, you know, this person who's, you know, framed to be Phineas Fogg's assistant, who's going around with Fogg on his journey around the world in 80 days, and basically at one point, he plans to actually try and stop Fogg, and it's a really interesting storyline. I was really enjoying that storyline, but then the climax of the storyline was so inconsequential, like, oh, is that seriously how we're ending that storyline in the show? Because, I mean, I don't know the source material. Maybe that's how that storyline ends in the book, but I don't know the book. So I was watching the show going, oh, that's really how you're ending that storyline. Gets to the end of that whole storyline with Passepartout, you know, trying to stop Fogg at one stage. It feels very anticlimactic, and I just want to do more from that. And also, the show is very overstyled. Honestly, it feels like the producers of this show watched, you know, the BBC Sherlock series of Benedict Cumberbatch and went, actually, we love that style in that show, like I do. I love the style of the Sherlock TV series. I think it's actually fantastic, but it feels like producers have watched the Sherlock TV series. We like the stylistic elements of that show and trying to incorporate that into this show. And there's so many parts of this show which just feel over-stylized, and it doesn't work whatsoever. It's kind of like Tarantino-esque, where it's quite postmodern, and it's almost like the show's going, oh, look at the style we're doing, look how amazing the filmmaking is, but in the end, I'd rather the show just be, I don't know, not normal with its filmmaking, not, you know, down to earth, but at the same time, no, I'd rather the show just be a bit, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, just a bit, you know, not overly stylized. That's what I'm trying to say in the end. I'd rather the show just be its own thing and not try and do something else. Because honestly, there were so many parts of the show, like I forgot which episode it is, but there's one episode where it took place in the desert, and it was so overly stylized that I didn't care about what was going on anymore. Because I was like, why are you doing all this editing when in the end you should just be focusing on the story you're telling? Because, you know, in the end, you know, the stylization might just be trying to add some energy into the show, but it didn't for me personally. I wasn't watching the stylization going, wow, this is really adding charisma and energy into the show, because it wasn't. In fact, the only reason the show has any energy is, like I said before, David Tennant. Honestly, David Tennant is my favourite interpretation of Doctor Who we have so far. Honestly, I loved David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. I mean, if you didn't, I'm shocked. I think everyone loved David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. That's the reason I liked him so much in this show, because I also love him in Good Omens. I think he's great in Good Omens. And, you know, he adds so much energy into those roles he plays, and he does here. He's the reason I kept watching the show. I didn't really care about much of the other supporting characters, apart from him. Now, saying that actually, I was kind of interested in the subplot to the Gentleman's Lunch Club back at, you know, London, where Fogg has his bet with somebody he's known for quite a long while, like £20,000 to get around the world in 80 days. It's quite an interesting subplot in the film, and I was interested in that. But saying that though, I wasn't really interested in Passepartout that much, because I think the whole time with him became quite anticlimactic, and also I wasn't that big on Fix as a female journalist in the show. I didn't feel the character was that interesting and that fun to watch. I don't think the actress did a bad job playing her, I just didn't think the character was that well written. And also, another big problem with the show, in my opinion, is the final episode. So now, if you're planning to watch the show and you haven't seen it yet, spoiler alert here. Basically, in the first half of the final episode, Fogg meets Estella, this woman he's been in love with for so long, and this woman he left behind all these years ago when he was originally planning to sail around the world. And he meets her again in the first half of the final episode. And I honestly think he shouldn't have. And, you know, I actually think it would have made a better story if he didn't meet Estella again. And in the end, he just went along with his friends that he's met on this journey, and instead, he didn't become a character to them, and actually, it would have been just... I just think it would have been better storytelling if he didn't meet Estella again. I just think that would have been much better if he didn't see Estella again, and just carried on his journey by himself. I don't understand why the story did that, I understand why the show had Estella in there in the final episode, but I wish it did it in the end. I wish Fogg didn't meet Estella in the final episode. I thought it would have been better if he didn't. I thought that would have been better storytelling, and I thought it would have made a better ending. In saying that though, I do like the second half of the final episode quite a lot. I think the second half of the final episode is really enjoyable to watch. But I just would have preferred if he didn't meet Estella. I thought that was a bit... I thought that was almost brilliant if he didn't. Actually, saying that, I thought it would have been brilliant if he didn't meet Estella. I thought that would have been so good, because it would add so much more to his character. But in the end, he met Estella, and I just kind of felt that that became a bit melodramatic, and not in a good way. And also, the show's musical score is very Hans Zimmer-esque, and I know Hans Zimmer did the main theme of the show. Like The Crown, he did the main theme of The Crown, he also did the main theme of the show, and I'm fine with that, you know, Hans Zimmer, everyone loves him. Personally, I don't. And honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the score of the show, because again, it was trying to make everything feel grand, when you just watch the show, it didn't feel as grand as its title. So you have this handsome score, you know, roaring in the background, you know, dum, dum, da, dum. That's what it kind of sounds like. It sounds like his scores for the Sherlock Holmes films with Robert Downey Jr. That's what it sounds like. And in the end, the score didn't really work in the context of this show, in my opinion. I'm not saying the score is bad, but it didn't work for me at all. But saying that though, I did enjoy watching the show. And I'm not just saying that, I did enjoy watching the show. I watched all 8 episodes. I enjoyed watching it, mostly because of David Tennant. Honestly, if David Tennant was in the show, I don't think I'd like it at all. I don't think I would like the show at all if David Tennant wasn't there. In fact, I think I would rather dislike the show if David Tennant wasn't in it. But the fact is so, David Tennant is in this show, and he's given such great performance and adding energy into this dull and anticlimactic and inconsequential and just bland show. Honestly, there's so many parts of the show that just kind of feel like we're going to America now. We're going to meet all these American stereotypes and add this message of cruel racism in America. Like, there's one episode where they go to America and they meet members of the KKK. And obviously, you know, the KKK is quite a difficult subject matter. You know, the show didn't shy away from that. But at the same time, though, did they need to meet the KKK? I didn't really feel like this show was that sort of show to do that, if you get what I mean. I didn't really feel that this was the sort of story where Fogg and his friends would go and meet the KKK and cowboys in America. It just kind of felt like, it just felt very 2022. It's supposed 2022 now, I was about to say 2021. No, it felt very of this time. I honestly think if this show was made 10 years ago, that story would have happened in the American episode. Now, like I said before, I don't know the story. Maybe that happens in the books. But for me watching it, I was like, do you really need to do this? Like, I don't really think this show was that short show to add a message about racism in America in there. I just don't really think that episode was that good. And also, there's another episode where they go to India, and again, that felt very melodramatic and not in a good way. It felt very modern again, and I also think that if that episode was made 10 years ago, the episode would be very different. And I'm not saying it's woke or anything like that, I hate that phrase. I'm not saying it's woke, I'm just saying that I think this show is very much of its time. Sometimes that works, because sometimes it adds a bit more energy into there, but also sometimes that doesn't work. And I think it's a very 2022 show. That's all I'm going to say there. I'm not saying it's woke, I'm just saying it feels very much of its time, and not necessarily in a good way most of the time there. But anyway, saying all that though, like I said before, I did enjoy this show, and it isn't like WandaVision. Like, when I did my review of WandaVision, I remember saying, okay, I really enjoyed the show overall, but actually, when I look back at WandaVision, I realised how much it wasn't really working for me at all from about halfway through. But actually, this show, you know, I did enjoy watching every single episode. I have no intention to go back and rewatch the show ever again, but it was one of those shows that whilst it was on, I did enjoy watching it. I sat down to watch it each evening that I watched it, and I did enjoy my time, you know, with Fogg and his friends, and they went around the world, or in my opinion, went around different set pieces in 80 days. That's what it kind of felt like. But in the end, though, I did enjoy watching it. It is a fun show to watch, just instantly forgettable once you finish each episode. And actually, I think the last half of the final episode is brilliant. I think it's really good fun, and my heart was racing. I was really enjoying it. But there's so many other parts of the show that I would just cut out, and there's so many other parts of the show which just didn't really work for me. And so overall, I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it for the most part because of David Tennant, because he injected life into this dull, bland, anticlimactic, and inconsequential show, which I kind of enjoyed watching, but I have no intention to check out anytime soon in the near distant future. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Around the World in 80 Days, I'm going to say it's a 6 out of 10. You know, in the end, I gave this show a low rating there, but I did still enjoy it, and I mean I did. And I enjoyed it because of David Tennant. In fact, you know, I kind of have the same viewpoint of this show as I do with something like Loki. I enjoyed watching it, but when I look back at it, I have no intention to watch it again. And I know I'm compared to Marvel series there quite a bit, but to be honest, I don't watch much TV, so, you know, the only other TV I saw last year in 2021 was the Marvel shows for the most part. I did watch a couple of other TV shows, but for the most part, I watched the Marvel TV shows. And so when I look back on TV in 2021, that's what I look back on. So actually, I feel the same way about this show as I do with Loki. I was saying that though, when I look back on Loki, I actually really liked that. But this show, I enjoyed. That's what I'm going to say about it. I enjoyed it, and I have no intention to watch it ever again. Honestly, David Tennant saved the show for me. He made me watch it time and time again. He made me watch each episode as I sat down to watch it because I knew I was going to find enjoyment in his performance, and you know what, I did. And in fact, actually, before I watched the show, after I watched the first episode of the show, I did read a review in the Radio Times that said something like, you know, David Tennant gives 10% in Around the World in 80 Days. If this is David Tennant giving 10%, then what the hell is he giving in Broadchurch? And I like the performance in Broadchurch, but he is far more energetic in this than he was in Broadchurch. And that's understandable why he's not energetic in Broadchurch. He's kind of very different character from that show. And actually, I think he's given more effort into this show, more energy into this show, than this show really deserves. I enjoy the show because David Tennant injects life into this dull and inconsequential TV drama, which didn't really work for me, but I enjoyed watching at the same time. And I have no intention of watching anytime soon. In the near to the future, I have no intention of watching ever again. But you know what? It was fun whilst I was on. And that's kind of how I feel about Around the World in 80 Days overall. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Around the World in 80 Days, I'm going to say that it's a 6 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, what do you think of Around the World in 80 Days? Please do comment down below, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Anyway guys, thank you as always for watching, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like subscribe on this video, and look forward to many more both film and TV come very soon on this channel. See you guys again soon, bye bye for now, bye!